believe that's true.
That is indeed true. True or false? Nicotine is proven to be an addictive substance which has negative effects on developing brains.
True.
That is indeed true.
I'd say that's higher.
That's your face.
Oh, I honestly think that number is bigger, so I'm going to go false.
Okay. Thankfully, it's true. The numbers have decreased about 5 years.
Growing Together is brought to you by an underwriting grant from.
Life-changing experiences can happen in a second. Like the moment you learn you're pregnant, the University of Kansas Health System maternity care team in Great Bend has 4 physicians, including 2 OBGYN and 2 family medicine physicians. Learn more at kansashealthsystem.com/Great Bend Maternity.
Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas, their goal is to make Kansans healthier. The Department of Pediatrics, our goal is to treat children and help them be well. So it's a natural partnership.
We're from here. We live in these communities. We get up out of bed every morning to make healthcare better in Kansas, and I can't think of a better way to do that for families and kids than by supporting K-Wichita Pediatrics.
Kansas Health Foundation, United Methodist Health Ministry Fund, Western Kansas Community Foundation, Northwest Kansas Economic Innovation Center.
At Southwind Bank, we are dedicated to helping generations grow, dream, and thrive. Southwind Bank, for generations. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Salina Pediatric Care at Salina Regional Health Center, offering care for infants, children, and adolescents. SalinaPediatricCare.com.
Danny and Janice Reichenborn, Wilson State Bank, La Pasadita Carniceria of Great Bend, and viewers like you, thank you.
Once you start, you can't stop. If I could tell anyone that, I would, because as someone who has been down that path before, it's definitely one thing that I wish I would have known. And so being able to tell kids that once you start, you can't stop, it's something that's gonna linger with you your whole life, whether it's you quit but you're still tempted by it, or you can't shake that addiction, you're always gonna have to be fighting that.
Do your peers consider vaping safe?
I think that's one of the biggest myths that we deal with, especially in Resist, is that vaping is a safe option, it's not gonna harm anyone. But when we look at it and when we look at some studies that have been shown, it may not be as harmful and it may not have the same effects as cigarettes or cannabis or anything like that, but it definitely does have its health effects, and it does create significant problems if you use it. So now we're seeing a lot more underage kids use vapes, and one of the biggest things that affects that is the ability to just have either their older siblings or their parents or their friends who are over that 21-year-old age, where they can just go in and get it for them. As well as in some towns and some areas, they have different vape shops and stores that you can just go in and they don't ID you, and you can purchase that. And as far as the money thing goes, vaping is a very costly habit to develop. Each vape costs about $25 to $35 depending on what brand and model that you get. And so finding a way to support that addiction, especially at a young age where you might not have a job or might not be able to get that money, it can also create some problems in that form too.
Have you noticed any changes in the health or behaviors of peers who vape often?
I think a lot of times it's just that short-tempered. It's people where they get into different situations and they find themselves not being able to stay patient as long, or they immediately reach for that argumentative type of conversation. And so just being able to have them sort of go straight from 0 to 100 out of nowhere is kind of the biggest effect that we see. When it first started becoming an issue, we saw a lot of just hard consequences, this is wrong, you gotta fix it. But now, as far as we're moving forward with technology and different things like that, we have different programs like we've looked at before, like My Life, My Quit, which have come into the picture, and we're able to see a lot more students and just underage people go to those different types of programs, and it's able to help them a lot more because it's that education. Instead of just that, no, this is wrong, you gotta stop, you're gonna get in trouble. Now these kids are getting that education that they need, and they're getting those materials that they also need, and so it's a big, big positive change.
Great news! Nicotine and cigarette use amongst teens has trended downwards over the past 3 years, despite marketing aimed at kids. However, common knowledge about vaping is, well, not so common. Today's guests are devoted to helping protect young people from the risks of vaping. We visit with Dr. Nikki Nollen, who researches the impact of vaping on health and society. Donna Gerstner and Garden City student Oliver Spencer shed light on student vaping, and Finn Lanning and Sheriff Andy Vanderweg share what's new and effective in prevention and harm reduction. Welcome to Growing Together. So, what is vaping, and what are some common terms or slang that parents should know about?
Great question. So, vaping is the act of using a vape, and a vape is a device that has a battery and a coil and some reservoir to hold liquid, and it aerosolizes that liquid so it can be inhaled by the user, which is vaping. And that liquid often includes things like nicotine, most relevant to today, but also can include cannabis products and flavors and all kinds of other things.
Mm-hmm. What are some common myths about vaping?
So when vaping first came on the market, it was marketed as a cessation or treatment device to help people stop using tobacco products. One myth that's kind of lingered from that is that vaping is safe, or that it's an alternative to smoking that is safe for you. And in reality, that's not true. Vaping is not safe. It is a perhaps less harmful alternative to traditional cigarettes, but it also poses significant health risks.
Up next, a visit with Dr. Nikki Nollen of the Kansas University Medical Center. And later, we'll hear how vaping is being approached in local schools and learn some practical approaches to healthy family discussions. What are doctors learning about vaping through current research studies?
So that's a very broad question. The state of the current evidence suggests that for adult cigarette smokers who have tried to quit with FDA-approved medications and who have not been successful, or for adult smokers who are simply not interested in trying to quit right now, that e-cigarettes or vaping products represent a harm reduction tool. That doesn't mean they're harmless, but they're a harm reduction tool. They generally have less of the harmful and potentially harmful constituents that are found in cigarette smoking. And not only do they have less of the harmful and potentially harmful constituents, but the ones that they do have are found at lower levels. But you also have to balance that with youth vaping and the youth vaping epidemic. And so what we're finding there is that youth find an appeal to these products. And so the rate of youth vaping, while it's gone down in recent years, it was quite high, 5 years ago. And so these products are providing an addiction to nicotine to youth who generally would not have ever started smoking cigarettes if it weren't for, or been exposed to nicotine if it weren't for these products. So it's kind of it's a double-edged sword, I would say.
How does nicotine affect young people?
That's a great question. And so I think that what we hear most about and what we know most about is the impact of nicotine on the developing brain of youth. And so we know that the brain is still wiring itself during adolescence, and it's still wiring itself, especially in the areas that control attention, learning, mood, and impulse control. And that nicotine from e-cigarettes or cigarettes disrupts the brain's development process in these areas. And we know mostly more of our work has been around nicotine and effect from cigarettes. It's also been found for e-cigarettes, but that it alters mood and mental health. Specifically, it's increased anxiety, depression, and irritability. It impairs cognitive function. We see oftentimes trouble with concentration, attention span, and memory. And it also, I mean, most concerningly, leads to a lifelong addiction to nicotine. There are other effects of nicotine and vaping in the lungs. Particularly, it irritates the airway and causes inflammation. And also to the heart. We know that nicotine is a stimulant, so it increases heart rate and blood pressure. The issue is that adult cigarette smokers are already experiencing these effects as a result of the cigarettes, right? And so they might experience a lessening of many of these things if they were to switch to e-cigarettes. But for youth, the issue is that these are youth who generally would not ever have developed an addiction to nicotine. And so we are seeing these effects in a population who would not have ever had any of these issues.
Considering all the research done about vaping, what are some helpful takeaways for parents and caregivers?
So I think start talking to your kids early. I think prevention here is the most important thing. And so many times, we will see high school age kids who started vaping in middle school, and they, are now either addicted, wanting to quit and can't quit, or they're experiencing some of the things that I mentioned before in terms of, mood disruptions in mood and focus and concentration and irritability. And so I think talking to kids early, these products are out there, and oftentimes kids, they don't know what they're using. They have no idea. It's just something that is cool that everyone else is doing, but it's a product that will impact them potentially lifelong. So I think that's probably the best kind of piece of advice that I would provide. And then the next is for a parent who has a child who is vaping and who cannot quit, get them help. It's not as easy as just stop using it, right? So it's a real addiction to nicotine. And in order to be able to quit using nicotine, they're probably going to need a nicotine replacement therapy or one of the other FDA-approved non-nicotine medications, which we know help with nicotine addiction.
Dr. Nollen, thank you for sharing these findings with us.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
When should adults start having conversations about vaping with their children? And what are some effective ways to start that conversation?
Great question. So, we're seeing now more and more that vapes are showing up even in elementary schools. So I think the most important piece of advice is to start this conversation early. It's much easier to prevent addiction to nicotine products than it is to, interrupt an addiction once it's already started. So equipping kids, if your kids are out in the world, they're going to run into these devices at really young ages. So starting those conversations early is extremely important. I think it's also really important to approach this issue with curiosity and open-mindedness, to talk to your kids about what they're seeing and invite them to respond in open ways to what they're seeing in the world, and then educating yourself so that you can have meaningful dialogue with your kids about what to do when they run into peers using vaping devices, or they're offered to use a vaping device, and really equip them with the knowledge about the impacts of these on their health and the risk of addiction and the impacts on their mental health before they run into those situations in the world.
Yeah, I think a lot of the times when parents are trying to have those conversations with teens, it's really important for kids, and especially the younger they are, to know that they can trust their parents. And so a lot of the times when I'm talking to my peers and I hear that they're either too scared to reach out to someone and get that help, or they're just not at that point in their lives where they feel comfortable reaching out and making themselves vulnerable.
How would you suggest a parent can foster that safe space?
One of the things that I've seen work a lot of the times is just knowing that no matter what, even if a consequence may come, it's okay to come and bring forth what may become an issue. And also just knowing that it's okay to say no and kind of counteracting some of those things that they may face when they go out into the world.
Okay, wonderful. How is vaping hidden from teachers, parents, caregivers?
Well, it can be hidden numerous ways. Oftentimes that you'll see that maybe the child will have, maybe a high school kid more than a child, but they'll have it in their hoodie. And when the teacher turns to the blackboard, then they will vape it and the smoke goes up in the air and it dissipates so quickly that the teacher doesn't know it, turns around, smells something, but it smells like perfume, so no big deal. They don't understand that that's going on. They oftentimes look like flash drives, so that's very confusing, or a game, or many different other apparatuses. There's even been a watch that looks like, that is a vape that looks like a watch.
With traditional cigarettes, it's much more difficult to hide that you're smoking because it fills a room, and if you were trying to smoke in your bedroom, it makes its way out the door and you can definitely smell it. So it's much harder to detect that your kiddos are using vapes, and we're up against all kinds of products that make it even easier for kids to hide vapes. This hoodie, for example, has pockets for you to put your vapes in, and then the strings of the hoodie actually allow you to hit your vape without it being obvious what you're doing. So there's backpacks and hoodies and all kinds of devices that are specifically designed to make it easier for kids and people to conceal that they're vaping.
What's currently being taught in Kansas in middle and high schools about vaping, either through curriculum or special programs?
I think one of the biggest things that we have done, especially in Kansas, is we've really focused on the vaping aspect of education itself. And in law enforcement, not only are we out there teaching and educating, obviously we're also doing the enforcement part. And the consequences, not only if you were to do it, but also if you are caught doing it, the consequences is that as well.
Some of the programs that are out there that are free to use are Catch My Breath. Stanford Medicine has a toolkit that's evidence-based. And also American Lung has an in-depth program, which is an education program that they can utilize directly in the schools and learn from that.
Finn, can you help us understand the risks that go along with vaping? And if we understand the risks, what might make it so hard to quit?
Yeah, really good question. So the hard reality is that 95% of adult smokers started smoking before the age of 25, and the vast majority of those started before the age of 18. So we know that developing brains are especially susceptible to addiction and to the influence of nicotine. So and nicotine is an incredibly addictive substance. And so when these young people are exposed to nicotine products at such young ages, the propensity for lifetime addiction is serious and high. Another significant risk is that, these vape products are largely unregulated, and we really don't know what's in a lot of them. And so, nicotine is inherently dangerous and risky, but these vapes also include a number of other products like, solvents, and they also include all kinds of flavors. And many of these flavors, over the course of the decade or so since vapes have become popular, have been found to be extremely dangerous and cause all kinds of health risks. And we also really aren't clear what the long-term risks are. But another major risk factor is the impact of vaping on youth mental health as well.
Mm-hmm. Andy, do you have anything to add?
I think one of the biggest things with that we see, especially in the law enforcement realm, is getting the mindset of your typical, I smell tobacco smoke, so it must be smoking. Us in law enforcement have to recognize that not all vapes are made the same. They don't all look the same. The other thing is when you smell something that's different, you might have to perk up and look at that a little bit more and go, well, that might be a vaping device, or it might be something in there that would cause us to be concerned, and look into that a lot further, especially.
What is research showing about mental health trends in teens who are vaping?
Well, what it is showing is that if you currently are depressed, you become more depressed. Also, it brings on anxiety, and all you're doing is you're driven all the time to get that hit, so you don't care about anything. So it really causes a problem with depression, anxiety, all sorts of mental health issues.
And nicotine is especially tricky in this way, and tobacco companies know that. And so a common misconception amongst youth is that vapes are a way to deal with stress or a way to give you a little bit of a buzz. And while there is some truth to that being a short-term impact of nicotine, as the nicotine in your system starts to fade away, which doesn't take very long, you actually have the opposite effect. It increases anxiety, it decreases your overall mental health. And we also know that nicotine as a substance disrupts the chemical balance in your brain. And so over time, it affects things like your dopamine and serotonin levels, and actually, on the whole, is a significant negative effect on your mental health. So kids are using it because they think it's helping them, and in reality, it exacerbates the very thing they're trying to solve.
How are statewide school policies around vaping and nicotine products emerging?
Well, the state education department set out a listing of what they would like to see as far as policies go. But obviously, every school develops their own policies. But one of the things that we've seen, and we hope that a lot of schools will utilize that policy, is that a first-time offender, instead of doing out-of-school suspension, have it be in-school suspension with an education piece and possibly some help with cessation or something of that sort. Whenever you do out-of-school suspension, what is the youth doing? He's probably at home vaping. So we don't want that to happen, and we want them to stay in school and get the rewards of being educated.
I think one of the biggest things that we've seen, with school policy too, is taking a zero tolerance policy on this and focusing more on the zero tolerance of it all, and taking it by case issue of how do we deal with this now. And a lot of schools are getting, I think, in the case of education pieces, and not necessarily like the out of school suspension, and keeping those kiddos in school as much as they can, like we've said before. Yes.
For parents or caregivers, what are the evidence-based recommendations in intervening and supporting a teen who is vaping?
So vaping and nicotine products, just like any other substance, is a substance use and addiction issue. And I think it's important to reframe the use of these substances in that context. And just like with any addiction, folks that are addicted need access to supportive folks in their life, and they need access to treatment. And there's a lot of resources that are available. My Life, My Quit is a state line that's developed specifically for youth that they can access through the phone, which is not a common way for youth to want to access support, but they can also access it through text message and through chat on the website. So it's geared specifically to youth and run by trained tobacco treatment specialists that really are there to help. So that's a great resource for youth that are using, and also working with your pediatrician or your general practitioner to really look at the possibility of medical intervention, including nicotine replacement therapy, is also a really important part of supporting our kids to get rid of this dependency.
The great thing about My Life, My Quit, there's also resources there available for parents and teachers alike.
In general, what else should parents and caregivers know about vaping?
Vaping, as we've talked about already, is something that's super easily hidden. And so being able to not, especially if you're suspecting that someone you know is partaking in vaping, making sure that they're not able to seclude themselves or hide themselves away to where they do have that access to be alone and be able to vape. Especially because, like Donna mentioned earlier, that aerosol that goes up in the air dissipates so extremely quickly. And so we are not able to detect that as easily if it would be a cannabis product or if it would be a tobacco cigarette.
Anything else to add?
I think it's important to note that this isn't a new issue, and for 100 years, tobacco companies have been targeting particularly youth, but also other vulnerable populations to addict them to their deadly substances. And this is just another iteration of that same tactic, and I think it's important to keep in mind that it's the same folks doing the same thing, and that we need to continue to fight against the tactics that they're using and give young people another narrative that to go alongside the media narrative that often happens.
Thank you to all of you for having a great discussion about how we can encourage healthy behaviors in young people. To connect with more about today's topic, check out our website at smokyhillspbs.org and follow us on social media. For Growing Together, I'm Dallas Arp.
Growing Together is brought to you by an underwriting grant from
Life-changing experiences can happen in a second. Like the moment you learn you're pregnant, the University of Kansas Health System maternity care team in Great Bend has 4 physicians, including 2 OBGYN and 2 family medicine physicians. Learn more at kansashealthsystem.com/Great Bend Maternity.
Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas, their goal is to make Kansans healthier. The Department of Pediatrics, our goal is to treat children and help them be well. So it's a natural partnership.
We're from here. We live in these communities. We get up out of bed every morning to make healthcare better in Kansas, and I can't think of a better way to do that for families and kids than by supporting Wichita Pediatrics.
Kansas Health Foundation, United Methodist Health Ministry Fund, Western Kansas Community Foundation, Northwest Kansas Economic Innovation Center.
At Southwind Bank, we are dedicated to helping generations grow, dream, and thrive. Southwind Bank, for generations. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Salina Pediatric Care at Salina Regional Health Center, offering care for infants, children, and adolescents. SalinaPediatricCare.com.
Danny and Janice Reichenborn, Wilson State Bank, La Pasadena Carniceria of Great Bend, and viewers like you, thank you.